Hey everyone. Today's lesson is going to be over the levels of hierarchy and classification. So, our learning objective for this lesson is that we're going to categorize using a hierarchical classification system based upon similarities and differences among the shared groups. So, to start with levels of organization, okay, a hierarchical classification system is just a system of scientific taxonomy that's used to categorize organisms into subgroups within larger groups. So, what that means is that if I just state that I'm talking about animals, that's too broad, okay? There's so many different types of animals. You have reptiles, mammals, insects, amphibians. So, scientists use this classification system in order to be able to group groups of animals together so that way we can be more specific because we know that reptiles and mammals, while they are all animals, have different characteristics, and that's what makes them different from each other. And then there are going to be 8 levels to this hierarchy classification system. This is going to be probably the most important thing for you to learn is what these 8 levels are and how they're different from each other. So these are the 8 levels of categorization that we're looking at. So over off on the right hand side here, you can see the ones that are bolded are what the name of that specific level is. So you're going to want to write these down for sure. So domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So those are the 8 levels to classification that scientists use. And we can determine exactly what every single living organism in the world is based upon these kingdoms or these classifications right here. So there's a really good mnemonic that people use to try and remember the ordering of these specific levels. So we are going to use Dear King Philip came over for good soup. Now, if you don't know what a mnemonic is, it's just an easy way for your brain to try and remember a concept that might not be easy. So, Dear King Philip came over for good soup is a very short little sentence, and the first letter of each word here is pertaining to the levels of classification that I have off over here. So for deer, the D is obviously standing for domain. King, the K is standing for kingdom, and as it goes down. So I would highly recommend you write down this mnemonic as well to help you remember. In this specific example and picture that I have here, it is for a red fox. So if we travel through underneath each one of these bolded words, it tells you what the name of that domain, kingdom, phylum, class, and all the way down is until you get to Vulpes vulpes, which is the scientific name for this red fox right here. So when we have the levels of organization, we know that the characteristics become more specific at each progressing level. So what that means is that species are more similarly related down here in these levels than they are up here, okay? Within the domain, humans are actually in the exact same domain as plants and fungi. And now, while we share some characteristics, there's not a whole lot of things that we share that are the same. When you get down to species, it is only humans. And obviously, all humans, even though we have slightly different traits, we are all going to be much more similar to each other. We also know that organisms at each progressing level are more closely related. If the characteristics as you go down here are going to start getting tighter and tighter, that means that these are going to have to be more closely related. Again, humans are more similar to each other than if you compared a human with a fungi, which are in the same domain. And finally, the number of species at each level decreases at each progressing level. So as you go down, okay, domain is one of our broadest categories. And based upon that last picture, you can see there's a lot of things that are in each domain. And then kingdom, you're going to start getting a smaller sample size. Phylum, as you go down, they're more similar, so less species. Class, order, family, genus, species. Each time you go down, there's less species that possess those characteristics to be together. And finally, the last thing we want to talk about is what is a species. So, the most common definition that we have is a group of living organisms consisting of individuals capable of exchanging genes or interbreeding, leading to a fertile offspring. Now, this is not always going to work perfectly because we do know that this definition of species varies depending upon the scientist, but this is what we are going to go with here. So, donkeys and horses we know can create offspring, but their offspring is infertile. So if you have this horse over here and this donkey here, they can interbreed in order to create a mule, which is like an in between. And while they can create this, mules are not fertile. So that means they cannot reproduce on their own. So this is a clear example of how different species cannot interbreed successfully and be able to continue on. So we know that a donkey and a horse are two separate species, not only just by their anatomical features and their DNA, but also from the fact that they cannot produce a fertile offspring. So that's it for this lesson. So go explore further.